Hi, my name is Donna Ramirez, and I'll be interviewing Mr. Rivera. He's a GISD teacher. We're going to ask you 10 questions and just answer as best as you can. Okay, first question. How many years have you been teaching?
Well, I've been teaching for over 20 years now at GISD.
What grades have you taught?
Throughout these years teaching, I have taught from elementary through high school, and I have mostly taught students from second to fifth grade grades, especially second and third grade. So my main field has been elementary school.
How do generic influences play a more important role than environment influences?
Well, to answer this question, we might refer to the definition of learning styles, for instance, and the mental capacity or the genes of an individual, the genes that the individuals are born with. I think from a biological point of view, we have to consider that too. Our learning styles intend to reveal how students are different in the ways they acquire learning. Some elements, for example, may affect students' academic performance and their motivation. For example, for instance, a student may perform poorly in math or any other subject, not because they are unable to learn, but because the strategy that is used or utilized by a teacher or by an instructor is inconsistent with the student's learning style. And going back to the essence of the question, think about noise. For instance, students who like to study when it is quiet. They may use, for instance, headphones or wireless headphones to avoid the noise.
Can you give us an example of when genetic and environmental influences were interacted?
Well, this is pretty related to the previous questions. For example, an individual which is intrinsically motivated or smart enough to take advantage of education could accomplish great educational results, no matter their surroundings. Think about great personalities in history, in the past, that no matter how harsh their conditions were, they were able to accomplish great things in life. And this is to say, genetic influences and environment influences are really interlocked, are really interrelated. We can have many examples that will show how these components are interrelated. Just think a well-educated child who comes from a very educational influence environment, who is provided with lots of educational tools and resources and a good learning environment, chances are that this child will excel in educational life.
How do you tend to teach children who have individual differences?
Well, children could have individual differences. Those children who have individual differences require different ways to teach them to. It's a very complex process because lots of strategies and methods have to be utilized in that. Collaborating with other teachers and staff is a starting point.
Do you think that environmental factors have an influence on development on children? On each child, sorry.
And of course, the environment is quite important in this aspect. It's think about a child who is born and raised in a very dysfunctional environment, um, there are many chances, or chances are that this child will depict or show characteristics of this previous dysfunctional life.
Um, okay, so how do you tend to teach children who have delay in learning?
Well, it is important to implement strategies that address the needs of a student. Um, One could utilize several strategies uh, and methods which address the physical or the cognitive development, the communication development of the child, his social and emotional development too, as well as his or her adaptive behavior, meaning what he does every day, his skills and functioning. I could mention strategies such as planning, physical activities for times when the student has the most energy, for instance. I can provide uh, simple, fun obstacle courses that the student is capable of completing, provide opportunities for hands-on activities and experiences. You could also utilize the child's preferences and interests to build your lesson. Get input from the parents. I also allow the students time to complete those tasks and practice skill at his own pace. Normally, I break down tasks into smaller steps. Also, be as concrete as possible. Set a routine and be also consistent with the routines that you provide. You could use for instance, a large clear picture to reinforce what you're saying. So, all in all, the educator or an educator can utilize a vast of strategies to make sure that those students with special needs get the best education possible.
How do you tend to deal with children who are ill-tempered?
Well, dealing with children who are ill-tempered could be challenging in most of the occasions. Educators have to have a good classroom management to deal um, with these kind of students. Um, you have to have a vast of strategies in order to deal with this kind of behavior in class. You need to come up with effective responses. For instance, you should stay calm, and that's something I suggest. You stay calm, and so keeping your emotions in check is the first step to have um, the situation under control. You should observe also and the student, like you kind of like stand firm on where you can observe the students in question and show the class that you're actually under control. Um, but stay far enough, for instance, away to keep an eye on all of the students. It is your responsibility in a situation like that to keep the rest of your students safe, calm, and specifically uninvolved. Sometimes the best thing to do is to say nothing at all. If the angry student stops the behavior, simply continue on with what you were doing, allowing the students time to cool off. Another technique that I use is to calm the student using a calming language and reassurance to settle the student down. Also, the wait time, when you don't speak to the angry student until he or she um, is in calm and in a calm emotional state. It's also very important to document the student's behavior. Documentation is quite important in this process. You know, you can make a copy for your records. Plus, you contact the parents. Your severe behavior must be reported to the parents. But of course, refrain yourself for giving or offering opinions or conclusions on the matter. Students who misbehave should be held accountable to. That's another important thing. They should be held accountable for their actions, and the teacher, in this case, should provide a stiff consequence to the students for this misbehavior. Like, for instance, like separating the students for the rest of the students in class. And I also suggest that you, as an educator, when you have a situation like this, you should take care of it yourself, like getting involved or getting the administrators involved in this. Sometimes might show certain inability of you to control situations like this, and it kind of weaken your authority. Plus, also weakens your ability to make up your own decisions, you know, and show that you've got actually good or solid classroom management.
How do you encourage children to make the right decision in learning?
Well, one way to encourage students to make the right decision is to keep them as intrinsically motivated as possible. You can get them involved in the classroom, where they see participation as a fun thing, as an enthusiastic activity. It's very important to praise them in many ways, recognizing the work in class, displaying the work all over the classroom or all over the school, or a certain area where you can display the students' best work. Also, sending positive notes home. I particularly I set my expectations pretty high, so the students expect excellence. But showing enthusiasm is quite important too. You could have the students take ownership of what they do in class. Another important thing that you should consider, we could consider, is to make learning meaningful by relating lessons to the students' lives. So basically setting the example so that they also do the right thing and see the benefits of being good decision makers in their lives.
Do you discuss with other specialists in order to provide the right things for children with special needs?
Well, of course, teaching children with special needs is a very complex process, which involves a myriad of various educators and individuals in order to find the best way to instruct and educate these students with special needs. In my particular case, and I believe as a case of every teacher involved in giving the best service to these students, I do collaborate with other teachers, especially with specialists in this field, therapists, special educators, diagnostician, speech therapists, psychologists, and administrators, of course, and any other individual involved in this process. And as I said before, it is a very complex process which aims at satisfying the special needs of these students. It does take a village to educate these students, and we should have the moral obligation of every educator should have the moral obligation to offer the best of his expertise and efforts to serve these students the best we could, since they're also a very important part of our society.